Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, A CIO's Perspective, Ensuring Constituent Trust in Modern Government. I'm Dan Lorman, Senior Fellow at the Center for Digital Government, and I'm going to serve as your moderator for today's session. I'm excited that we're going to have, that you joined us, and we're in for a really informative session over the next 30 minutes. We have a few housekeeping notes that we'd like to pass along on your screen. Also, during today's webcast, you'll be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag GovTechLive to share key takeaways, quotes, and learnings from today's webcast. Now, joining me for today's discussion in this timely topic is Nadine Shaver, CIO for the California Franchise Tax Board, and Kathy Cruz, Director of Government Cybersecurity Practice at KPMG. Welcome. It's great to have both of you with us. And I want to jump right into a poll question to start off and get your views from the audience, and we'll dive right into the conversation. So we'd like to just get your thoughts on this. What is the number one thing your organization does to build trust? And so you've got 5 options here: train staff, backup test systems, apply redundant technology, protect and defend systems from cyber attacks, or something else. So please go ahead and put your answer in and submit that. And Kathy, any thoughts from your, while we're waiting maybe 30 seconds for them to answer, any thoughts on what you've seen as the number one way that people think they build trust?
Well, I don't know that there is a number one way. It's such a big topic. I'm happy we're diving into it today to talk about trust. Just from even a citizen perspective, while we're practitioners, we also forget we're citizens. And when you stop and think about the amount of data a government has about you, state of California, for example, you pay taxes, you have a car, you might receive other services from time to time, or your family may. And there is a lot of personal data that is held by a government entity. So when you think about trust, you can think about it from both ends of the spectrum, both as a practitioner securing citizen data, but also as a citizen and wanting your government to make sure they collect only the data that is absolutely necessary about you, nothing extraneous, and that it's protected.
Great, good points. Thank you so much. Well, let's go ahead and see what the poll results are there. Can we bring those up? And we see that, I guess, a little close there with training staff. Certainly is a big way to do that. Backing up systems, about 16%. Training staff at 34%. Redundant technology, not so much, maybe 5 people, 5%. And then 29% protect and defend systems from cyber attacks. That's certainly a big one and something else. So thank you for that. And so Nadine, are you with us? We're having some technical issues a few moments ago. We dive into the panel discussion. You can certainly put your questions in the Q&A panel. So Kathy, I'll start with the first question for you, and then we'll jump over to Nadine. Hopefully she'll be joining us. She was having oh, there she is right now. Good timing.
Perfect timing.
Little bit of backup there, but thanks, Nadine, for joining us. I jumped the first question for you. And that is this: the first foundational principle of the California Franchise Tax Board is to protect the privacy and security of data entrusted to us, quote unquote. That sounds very much like a trusted government. As a former FTB CISO and now the CIO, has your view of trusted government changed in your new role? Nadine.
So I'll say first, sorry for the technical issues.
Yeah.
At least I'm here now, and hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah, great. Sound awesome.
Okay, great. So the short answer is no, but I'm guessing you want a little bit more context. Security-minded culture is very important to FTB, and I would say is prevalent throughout the organization. And for me, it really starts at the top with that executive level support. Every project, every initiative that we go through, security and privacy are a part of those discussions. And we really try to be proactive and, incorporate those into those initiatives. And I guess the bottom line is it's not an afterthought for us. And I guess the best example I could share is that if there was a meeting going on and it was about, some sort of enterprise initiative, and my business partners noticed that security was not at the meeting, I would have several of them that would reach out to me and say, hey, there's this big initiative. Do you know about it? We didn't see security in the meeting. We think it's important for you to be there. And foundational to that is that our tax systems are built on self-compliance.
Sure.
So we get 22 million tax returns, more than that actually, and deposit over 170 billion with a B dollars annually. 83% of those tax returns, the taxpayers file and pay of their own volition and self-comply. FTB never really has to interact with that taxpayer and correct anything. So trust is a huge, huge, huge component of that. If we were to have data breaches or, share data without the appropriate authority, taxpayers wouldn't be so inclined to give us their data and maybe not be as transparent and honest on their tax returns. So, if that happens, non-compliance programs are very expensive. And, that would take a lot of money away from critical programs, that fund roads, schools, and those sorts of things. So, I think, bottom line is really today in my current role, it's just as important to me as when I was in the security role.
Fantastic.
Hey,
Thanks.
Nadine, if I can have a follow-up question, because Nadine, some of our government clients don't have that security-minded culture within their organization. They know that that's where they want to be, because then security is integrated into every discussion, every project. It's built in, not built on. Do you have any insight? I know you've been with FTB for a while. How did it get there, right? So what can organizations do to say, well, I'm not going to be able to get us there today, but if I could over the next couple of years, how would I get to that model where we're always naturally in a discussion, or as you say, someone will reach out and say, do you know about this initiative? Security should be involved.
You cannot be a roadblock, right? So my question would be, is if you don't have that culture, from a security perspective, how are you contributing to be part of the solution, right? I had to deal, in my agency role, I dealt with a lot of smaller departments that maybe didn't have some of this culture. And, a lot of it was just policy. Well, the policy says so you can't go do this. They start quoting NIST at them. It's like people don't get that. So it's really, I think, about building those relationships. Education is a huge part of what I did, in my security role. So not when I needed something, but ongoing education, right? So that when, let's say the Equifax breach came up, right? Well, I took that opportunity to say, hey, I wanted everyone to know, especially our executive management team, this is what's going on. This is how this happened. This is how we're not vulnerable to that. Thank you for your support that you've given us so that we're not in a similar position. So I think there's that balance of you have to acknowledge security is not cheap and these are investments, and, highlighting how those investments have paid off. But then by the same token, just educating people on what's going out in the various domains.
Great. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So Kathy, back to you. I'd like to know, in your experience working with government clients all over the world, what are some of the most effective ways to build trust?
Well, we talked a little bit before while we were waiting for Nadine to join that, from a citizen perspective, we do want our data to be protected, but we don't see behind the curtain, as a citizen. You don't know what is or isn't going on. So one of the main ways that our clients are building digital trust is through the user experience. Citizens want their government services to be user-friendly from anything, from anywhere. And most of us want it from our mobile device today rather than, let's say, from a computer. So a lot of our clients have gone to MFA, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, identity proofing, and internally using RBAC as part of their methodology and mechanism, and really moving towards zero trust. And I know that zero trust sometimes looks large. It has so many components to it, but most government entities have components already in place or in play in a zero trust architecture. So it's not approaching it from, oh my gosh, it's something new, it's something hard, it's going to be expensive, but really doing an assessment of what components do I have and how then do I build my roadmap towards more zero trust. So, verify but trust as opposed to the old trust but verify.
Yeah, like that. Thank you. So Nadine, back to you. New question. Modern government is a term that is used in a variety of contexts. For me, modern government is about the user experience and how easy or not it is to use technology to interact with a government agency. We know that it requires a continuous process of transformation to evolve citizen experiences. What are some of the ways that FTB approaches transformation and modernization?
So I think FTB's approach is really twofold. I think the first thing that's super important is that you just listen, right? What do your customers want? And what do the various business areas need to provide better service? So we do this by soliciting feedback from a number of different sources. We of course have ways for individuals to provide us feedback, but we also do some larger type things. For example, we have an advisory board, and this is made up of tax professionals, subject matter experts that provide us feedback and data on what they're hearing and what their struggles and issues are. We take that sort of feedback very, very seriously, which kind of brings me to the second point, which is planning. So you have to have a plan. Our systems are huge, and you can't just decide, okay, this is going end of life, let's replace it. Like, that's not the way these systems are easily replaced. So FTB has a 30-year IT vision. It's for system modernizations called the Enterprise Data to Revenue Project, or EDR. Phase 1 started in 2007, and that really focused on our tax return processing and building a portal. And that first phase was really foundational to the next 20 years. So we're building on top of that platform now. We just started this year with the vendor contract was onboarded. And this year we're focusing on compliance systems and enhancements to sort of that non-compliance type program. So, and how this benefits, the taxpayers is they're going to get notices now that allow them to self-correct their tax return. So rather than ending up in an audit or the collections program, they'll have the opportunity to correct these and fix it more timely. We're doing a lot of proactive communication and educational type programs and much better self-service. So like, for example, voice interaction on our IVR, or seamless transition between support channels. So if you're on chat and it gets more complicated, you can switch to the phone, right? So it doesn't have to go back on hold for a long period of time. So I think those sorts of things are very, very important. And phase 3 will start in 2026. So it's really sort of this lifelong journey. And I think without that plan, we really wouldn't be able to modernize. I'll just reference back to that 83% that I previously mentioned. And we do recognize that the better customer experience we get, the higher and higher that number can go. So I think that's always our focus as we try to incorporate that feedback.
That's really impressive. Thank you for sharing that. So Kathy, on the same topic, how does KPMG help clients with that journey?
Well, many of our clients were talking about, so they were not as far along as FTB, obviously, with the 30-year plan, but we had clients that were either talking about or in early planning stages, or even in an early phase of transformation when COVID accelerated the pace. And I think there are many lessons in COVID, but one, it put into sharp relief that you can't have aging infrastructures and at that point decide, now I'm going to do something about it, because the runway to do it is multi-year, and by then it's already aged out. So I think that what we're seeing in some clients is they have aging infrastructure. The workforce skill shortage is going to continue, especially in IT and in cyber. a lot of deferred projects and maintenance. All of that has kind of come together with this new demand for digital interaction. You know, everyone wants that. No one wants to go stand in a line or receive a letter. So what we're doing to help our clients is really to help prioritize and think about how to become sustainable, resilient, how to have data management and IT optimization, constituent-centric focus and allocation and priority of resources. I'd also say that, you know, the transformation and modernization that we're helping clients with, we're also helping their executive management and government see it as an ongoing process, not a project that has a beginning, middle, and end, and then it's over. And I think that's the danger that can happen in modernization, is you think you get somewhere and now we can stop. Well, that kind of thinking has gotten to aging infrastructures. So it's helping with that governance committee, that executive management, is to look at that as an ongoing shift and movement, not something that you will be finished with, because there will be something more that we can continue to do in terms of modernization and transformation and kind of that next shift, which I think FTB is the, you know, perfect example. If you start a 30-year plan, you've made adjustments along the way as newer technology has become available and more nimble. That wasn't maybe part of the original plan, but the plan was the blueprint. It's really executing on that blueprint.
Great comments. Thanks. Nadine, I'd like to ask you a different question here. Now, many organizations, the CISO reports to the CIO, and there are different opinions on, you know, where the CISO should report into an organization. At FTB, the CISO does not report in, yet there's always a heavy interdependence between the two functions. What is your advice to CISOs on building a strong relationship with the CIO and the IT organization as a whole? And what are some of the methods you've used to do that in your role?
So, you know, I think first you have to recognize that there are shared goals there. You know, it's very important that you build on some of those relationships, but really no CIO, no executive wants a data breach in their department. You know, and I would also sort of expand the question just a little bit to say you need to have strong relationships with all of the executive team, especially the CFO. You know, funding strategies are critical to the success of security programs. You know, tools are not cheap, and without the CFO support, it's going to be really hard to purchase them. You know, and when I think the most important thing to know when you're communicating with executives is you have to really know your audience and tailor that conversation. And I'll just give an example here. So executive managers understand risk and cost, right? And depending on your organization and the budget that you have allocated, all executive management is going to tolerate a certain amount of risk. If the CSO is going in and the sky is always falling, it's always doom and gloom, and you know, cyber attacks are on every corner, not only do you put the CIO in a very difficult position, but at some point, the rest of the executive team, they're going to stop listening. But if you go in there with options and risks associated with those options, you'll get engagement and participation in the conversation. And recall earlier, I said, I take every opportunity to educate. This also gives you the opportunity to educate, you know, in the context of something that's impacting your existing organization. And, you know, if you look at the working level too, those relationships are super important. You know, if security is always the one saying no to the, you know, technical areas or business areas, they're going to figure out how to work around you. And maybe they decide that asking for forgiveness rather than permission is a better strategy. So, you know, you really need to work together to figure out a solution that everyone can live with, and make sure that you share the why something won't work. That doesn't mean because policy says so. You know, I've seen a lot of security professionals that just point to NIST or policy, and it's like, that's why. It's like, no, that's not why. Why is the policy there? And take that opportunity to educate. A lot of times I would ask my staff is, what would you need in place to say yes? So if no is not in your vocabulary, you know, there's no constraints, budget's no object, what's yes? And I really think that question helps, because it starts to get them in the mindset of, okay, how can I say yes? And then let's work from that target. And, ultimately, if you can't agree on a path forward and you do have to escalate through the organization, then having that risk and options is very important. And, ultimately, this is a trust conversation. Those relationships are built on trust, communication, and compromise. You're gonna have to be willing to compromise as part of a solution. And don't misinterpret that last comment. I'm not saying compromise security, but there's always options for compensating controls and risk mitigation. So I would say be creative from a place of yes. And that goes a long way to build those strong relationships across the organization. And I know I expanded this question a little bit beyond just the CSO, CIO, but having these strong relationships across the organization will have a very positive impact on your relationship with the CIO.
Yeah, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
totally agree. And I can, in my career, a lot of stories of, your former CIO in the state of California, Terry Takai, when she was in Michigan, and learning to get to yes, and not being the party pooper as a CISO, and so many stories I can tell you about that. I almost lost my job always saying no. And Terry taught me how to say yes, and really get to yes, and offer options. So I'm 100% with you. Got to be an enabler. Kathy, just maybe a couple minutes here. We got 6 minutes, 7 minutes left, but we'll do a wrap up. Maybe a couple questions from the audience. But any thoughts further on how to build the relationship between the IT and the security teams?
Well, I think Nadine, she just gave an excellent example of, there was an article years ago in the Harvard Business Review about the beauty of the and the tyranny of the or. And I think that that's a great example of how to get to yes, rather than always say no with no options. It can be yes with some caveats, for example. But I'm glad you brought this question up, because trust starts inside. If you want a trust culture, if you want citizens' trust, it starts with a team inside that has to be the enablers, right? So digital transformation affects people first, then come the processes, then come the technology and security. And when those aren't in harmony, you're just not going to get where you want to go. It's the old, all hands on the same oar, right? Rowing in the same direction. And I think when you don't come together first to say, what is our mission? And that we all agree this is our mission, regardless of what unit we may sit in or what, part of the organization that we represent. When you get everybody galvanized around a common mission, then you can work through the, yes, but how about that? Or I need this instead. Would that work? That negotiating period. It's when the territories are drawn, then trust is already broken, and you really can't get to that end state you want, which is digital trust for the citizen. It's already, kind of doomed from the start. So it's building that first inside. It starts too with the culture, with the leadership, with a common goal within the organization that people have bought into. We work with our clients on organizational change management, for example, because if you don't have that, you just can't aspire to it and flip a switch and get there. There's a lot of work that has to be done organizationally to get everybody's buy-in that we really want to make this shift, and we want to build trust internally so that we can provide it externally around our data and around citizens' trust.
Yeah, I love that. It's so good. I mean, practical advice of that. I know when I was CISO in Michigan, I would tell people, my team, do lunch, not just with the technical team, but with the business side, build those relationships, not just with the same sphere of people, but, with a wider look at the enterprise. And that's great, Kathy. So
well, it's also understanding the why.
Yeah.
Right. So why are we doing this? Even if I'm the technologist or I'm the person that's writing the system security plan, it's helpful if I know why we have this system. How does it enable our mission? Why is it part of what we do? I think when internally you're not involved in the why, it's really hard to have that internal trust and get galvanized around a single mission.
That's great. Great. I want to do one question from the audience quickly. Maybe Nadine, maybe just a literally less than a minute answer on this, because we started a little bit late. We may want to run 1 minute over a little bit here, but just one question, real quick response. Any thoughts or recent experiences with scalability to address how fast technology ages now? So I don't know if you have any examples of like what you've had to do at the FDB around technology aging and meeting that need.
This is a really tough one for government because of the way our procurement processes work, right? There's not a lot of agility in red tape, I guess is a good way to say it, you know? And so we tend to be very adaptable. You know, I think for some of these things, you have to be proactively looking at these. You know, filing season for us is like our Super Bowl Sunday, you know, and really looking at some of these things, using some of your outside vendor partners, right, to help as you look at how do we scale things up and scale things out. And I would say we've done that quite a lot with external partnerships, where my staff maybe will identify the issue, and to get solutions, you know, we use some of those RFI processes and things like that to get some feedback from the vendor community about, hey, what's everybody else doing? You know, Gartner's another good partner that we use quite regularly also.
Fantastic answer. Thanks. Well, I want to give each of you a final, literally try and make it 30 to 40 seconds. I know it's not much, but what one gold nugget or one bit of advice would you want to leave the audience with? You know, it could be something you've already said. It could be something new you didn't get a chance to say during this last 30 minutes. And I'll start with Nadine and then go to Kathy. Just, is there any one final thought you have on this topic of building trust that you really want to leave with the audience, Nadine?
So I'll just say trust for me is three things. The first is integrity, doing the right thing, even though it may be hard. The second thing would be transparency. You always need to be open and honest and share risk and problems when they arise. And the third is communication. You have to be able to clearly articulate 1 and 2 and build those relationships.
Great answer. Thank you. Kathy.
Well, she's hard to follow. So next time I think I'd like to reverse the order.
Okay, sorry.
I would say, you know, just keep in mind you're a citizen as well. And how do you want your data to be, you know, held, and what kind of trust do you want? In turn, provide that as well.
Thank you so much for that. Well, I want to be respectful of our time commitment, so we'll have to wrap it up here. In closing, I would just like to thank Kathy and Nadine for sharing their insights on today's webcast. And I would like to thank KPMG for making it possible to have this important webcast discussion today. And thanks also to our audience for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon at another government technology event. We hope you have a great rest of your day. So long.
Thanks.